We'd like to thank the European Institute, the the French Alliance, and the Maison Française for their amazing help in making this event happen tonight. Yvette is here to introduce our guest.
So our guest tonight hasn't spoken publicly in over a year and a half, so this is a very special event. Madame Kosciusko-Morizet, she grew up in the region of Paris. She went to École Polytechnique, she's an engineer by training. In 2002, she joined the presidential campaign of Jacques Chirac, helped get him elected, she advised him, and then she advised the Prime Minister Jean-Pierre Raffarin at the time on sustainability issues. That year, she also became one of the youngest members of parliament at 29 years old. She held that position for many years, really being very active in becoming a specialist in environmental issues. She was also elected mayor of a town called Longjumeau, a position she held for 5 years. And then when the President Nicolas Sarkozy was elected in 2007, she worked as Secretary of State for Ecology, and then she worked as Secretary of State for the Digital Development. And then in 2010, she became Minister of the Environment under François Fillon's government. At this point, she became sort of a rising star in French politics. Many people saying that one day she could potentially become president herself. And she really did a great work in bringing environmental issues at the forefront of national policy. In 2014, she was candidate to be the mayor of a small town called Paris, and only lost by a very narrow margin. Nevertheless, she was elected Vice-President of the center-right party, Les Républicains, in 2014. And then in 2016, she courageously ran for the primaries, the presidential primaries, against two ex-prime ministers, Alain Juppé and François Fillon. She also ran against the ex-president, Nicolas Sarkozy, and had a very honorable score. In 2017, unfortunately, she lost narrowly to the election of Member of Parliament for Paris. And so now she decided to go to New York, where she lives now, working for Capgemini, an international consulting company, where she is their Vice-President for Cybersecurity. So tonight she's going to talk to us about a topic she's very passionate about, which is Europe in the digital age. Some of the threats that Europe faces, the reforms that it needs to do in order to survive. And then at the end of her speech, we'll be taking some questions and answers, so keep them for then. So please, round of applause for Madame Kosciusko-Morizet.
So thank you for your invitation, thank you for your warm welcome. I invite you to a reflection on about how digitalization is impacting powers, all powers, economical powers, and of course political power. First, I'd like to make a remark. Across history, the large technological mutations have often changed the balance between centralized systems and autonomous organizations, and this had massive consequences on the structure of power. For example, the invention of printing, which accelerated the spread of ideas and eventually contributed to the revolutionary movements. Same for the invention of the vapor machine, which triggered industrialization and was a contributing factor for the creation of the nation states. And here we are today with digitalization, but digitalization is going the other way around. Those major technological mutations tended to concentrate power, and digitalization tends to spread power. This is not a minor issue. The dialectic between centralization and autonomy is a structuring one. In all fields, religion, arts, economy depend on it. And the interactions between them are powerful. Lenin suggested in his book, Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, so I quote him, "The enormous growth of industry and the remarkably rapid concentration of production in ever larger enterprises are one of the most characteristic features of capitalism. So he wrote that just before his heirs demonstrated that they could do even worse than him in terms of centralization of all topics, including in the field of arts, by the way, with the official art and the Soviet realism. So there has always been a dialectic between centralization and autonomy. There have always been utopists to oppose communities, alternative ways of life against the mainstream. What's new today, on this front, where sometimes history has happened, what's new there is that things are changing, and today there is not only a dialectic, there is a real trend. Today, the movement of autonomy and decentralization, call it as you prefer, is not marginal anymore. It becomes mainstream. So what was subversion yesterday in the ancient world is now the driver of a big ongoing transformation. And this is not a fashion. The drivers underlying this movement are powerful. So for the first time, decentralized, autonomous, local initiatives are not anymore confidential. They are both viable and scalable. This is due to technology in all domains, from energy, as you mentioned, I've worked a little on that, with solar panels, small windmills, to the manufacturing with the 3D printing. New technologies make possible and profitable local and autonomous systems. And this is of course also due to networks. They allow end users to collaborate at no cost without losing neither efficiency nor money or comfort. So subversion has turned into disruption. This movement is well engaged in the economy, and you can all see that, and for some of you maybe be the actors of that. But this is just a beginning movement in politics. In fact, in politics, the stage is more one of reaction. And both Emmanuel Macron in France and Donald Trump in the United States are examples of that, whatever their huge differences, of a sort of reaction to this movement. So let me illustrate this with a case I will pick for my current job, a case of identity in the modern age, identity and impacted by digitalization. Identity, and this is why I picked it as an example, is one of the prerogatives of power. It was not a coincidence if the church was running what we call in French the état civil under the ancient regime. And Napoleon, who as you know was a Corsican and therefore a genuine centralizer, paid a lot of attention to the civil code. The concept of a sole identity, inalienable and guaranteed, has created a power as much as power created the tools to register and control identities. And I ask you the following question. What can happen tomorrow in a world where we can change everything and give birth to someone new, a network, means of payment, everything, following a little trip through the darknet? The state and its agents used to be the only guarantors of identity until the invention of blockchain. It was a solid and very coherent system. We were born in a family, we register at the état civil, we bought a house which in France the notaire registered, with the money from a bank, itself guaranteed by the central bank. And later, as late as possible, the same team managed our identity as well. The état civil booked our death, and the notaire managed our will. but this was then. In those days, the identity was unique by definition and naturally inalienable. It's the whole purpose of the many protections around identity. However, today, it has become multiple, changing, and the components of identity are heavily traded globally because all of our personal data is a component of our identity, and each piece of data is of some interest for a business or another. Additionally, identity has not only grown from one to many, it has also moved from an assignment to a choice, at least for part of it. So identity was essentially something we received because we were born somewhere, with an identity validated by some central power, and today it has become a construction. We choose what we show of ourselves. We have pseudos. We design the face we turn to the different communities we are part of. By the way, the cyber war, which is one of my favorite topics today, finds here a special battlefield. Identities could always be stolen, and have always been stolen, but this was a complex sport. It has become ultra simple. So our papers are not easier to duplicate. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Because of biometry, facial recognition, all the new technologies protect our identity even better in its traditional sense. But this trend is now competing with the multiplication of the risks. And our identity is exposed to the social networks. In the social networks, it hides or comes out in the open as we construct images and reveal ourselves. The many faces of our digital identity are the new targets. So back to the subject. Blockchain could well bring about important changes to our approach to identity. Neophytes associate blockchain with cryptocurrencies, which are very much down those days, if you have some, you know that. Well, this is confusing the technology and its first applications. This is like thinking that the revolution can stop once the Bastille is taken. So Louis XVI made that mistake, and it did not end that well for him. And already we are seeing a number of initiatives based on blockchain in areas where the state has failed. I picked some of them. United Nations Women is utilizing blockchain to guarantee identities in countries where marriage before the legal age are frequently occurring, or to give an identity to a woman even though they are not officially registered and, for example, can't open a bank account. At the other end of the spectrum, Forbes is studying blockchain, as they say, to solve identity management problems. And these are only a few amongst a growing number of initiatives which all share two features. First, the state that used to be in charge of registering and controlling identities is either missing, like in the example with United Nations Women, or now sharing its prerogatives. And the second feature is that people in these examples are strongly engaged in building solutions to build or to protect their identities. So the question hence is, have we reached the end of history? Has the world switched to a radical autonomy, or is it switching to a radical autonomy? A new fully decentralized pattern? Surely not, but the balance has changed, or is changing. And centralization is being very much challenged. And the ancient dialectic between centralized power and autonomy that has nurtured many economic, social, political movements is fading and leaving room to a new animal, which is a hybrid. An animal that requires both creativity and commitment from their designers. And I think the future belongs to them, to the hybrids. So let me give some examples. So large platforms that are the new monopols of the modern ages. Small outfits transact and offer their services. In cybersecurity, Google launches Project Zero, a platform in which everyone can pinpoint the cyber holes, like the small warriors of cyberspace. Just like there is no one-size-fits-all technological solution, there is no unique provider, and no system can be safe that does not engage its end users in their own defense. Of course, we experience that very much in companies providing cybersecurity services, and all of us have developed governance, assessment, employees training. We offer ways, means, tools to enlist the employees in the cyber war, to give them tools to protect themselves and the companies they work in. So the companies are more or less in. The challenge is even more considerable for the states, because this is cultural. To develop new solutions, the states must invent new ways to cooperate and engage new participants. And this means that the states have to give up some of their prerogative and open up. In the end, there is a vital ingredient to that, which is responsibility. We must think long and hard about it, to achieve a system where it is shared fairly and efficiently. It must be redistributed as well. As the balance is changing between autonomy and centralization, the responsibilities are changing too. And it's also more difficult in a European context, where people are used to consider that ultimately all responsibilities rely on the state. I give again a cybersecurity example. Two major flaws, major attacks, NotPetya and WannaCry, exploited a flaw identified by the NSA in a Microsoft system. So who is responsible? The hackers, for sure, are responsible. But who else? What about the NSA that discovered the defect but was not able to protect the information? And Microsoft, who saw nothing? As a conclusion, let's say that for a long time we lived through a movement of power concentration, progressive power concentration. It was attacked at the margins. There has always, as I said, been a dialectic between centralization and autonomy. But we knew eventually who the winner was. It was centralized power. And today, subversion that was at the margin has morphed into disruption. And the states and the companies serving their objectives have to mutate. Here we are. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for your very interesting presentation. Talking about the centralization versus decentralization, don't you think that we're moving towards a different kind of centralization with companies like Google or Facebook, Amazon, which kind of tend to, I guess, how do you say that, grab all the power in their hands regarding all the data and the shift toward digitalization?
Yes, indeed. But where they're clever is that they're trying at least to hybridize a little bit of that. Onboarding end users, onboarding small contractors, like what Apple does with its platform, with the apps, or like what Google does with Project Zero. So they have understood that if they want to go on concentrating the power, they have to do at least as if, and a little more than as if, because The community of developers, for example, the community of application developers, is a real one and has some strengths in the ecosystem. So yes, there are still some sort of monopoles, but they are more or less, they have understood the dialectic and they are more or less trying to play it. My concern is more with the states, because the states, well, the centralized states have not understood. They're not trying to play it. In fact, they're reacting to it. And we see that both in the United States and in France. So companies are looking for ways to arrange themselves with this new trend. This is more or less efficient, and there is a reaction today too, because it's more and more visible that some of them are creating huge monopoles. But they are playing it a little more cleverly, I think. It looks like if some states had even not understood that something was happening.
Don't you think that there's also a competition, a technological competition between artificial intelligence and blockchain, whereas where blockchain is somehow a decentralization of data, where data is saved on all servers at the same time, but somehow AI is powered through the reverse mechanism, through the centralization of data. Don't you think that for the states there is also this competition between technology, where you see China, who definitely made the choice of AI against blockchain, I guess?
Indeed, there is. That's a very clever remark. I believe blockchain is very, very disruptive, because blockchain is really, as I said, people tend to think that blockchain is about cryptocurrency, because this is the first application, but it's only one application. In fact, blockchain is a very powerful means to bypass all third parties, well, to kill all third parties, and to bypass centralized power. AI is sort of moving the opposite, as it requires such a huge amount of data that you need at some point to be centralized, to concentrate the data, to build your system. So there are two parallel moves, let's say. Maybe this is a personal bias. I tend to think that blockchain's impact is underestimated. There is a fashion around artificial intelligence today. What I see from my business side is it's not changing things that quickly. The applications are not that revolutionary at this stage, at least. I mean, it's still maybe embryonic. And blockchain is underestimated, as it is seen mainly as a guarantor of the cryptocurrencies in general, and Bitcoin especially, which it is not. It's much more powerful than that.
So one of the state's function is a regulating function to protect the citizen, including their identity. So it has taken a while for people to actually grasp all the technological changes and how basically all the drawbacks it can also have on how we handle our daily lives and also manage our identity. So now that the states kind of start to understand what's going on, do you foresee more regulation, more legislation curtailing the power of some of these big companies and actually asking them to just safeguard their identities and put in place more firewalls and just regulation to make sure everything is safeguarded for the citizen?
So I think we definitely need some regulation on digitalization, on digital world, but the problem we have today is that the states are so defensive that they are counterfighting, fighting back, and fighting late. Both two wrong moves. Fighting late because it's moving so fast and it takes so long. I mean, I was a minister in digital economy when we were negotiating the GDPR. Now it's 10 years later, and I'm selling assessments to make sure that your company is compliant with the GDPR. By the way, we do great assessments, but there's such a discrepancy between the pace the states are working and the pace the world is evolving. So the states are doing it too late, and they are not in a positive mindset, thinking how will I use these new trends to ensure that I meet my objectives and the objective of the people. That's why I gave those examples of United Nations women, because I think that's great. I mean, there are countries where women are being denied having an identity, and this movement is using blockchain to make sure that these young girls have an identity, have a date of birth, and so the law that is supposed to be applied, that they can't be married before 13, is really applied, and that later on they will have the possibility to have a bank account. This is a positive way, and this should be the state to do that. It's a positive way to associate, to keep in mind and to keep in line of sight what are the objectives of the state, and to use the trend in favor of that. And on the opposite was that what I see in the reflections, ongoing reflections, the various states, centralized one, old ones, is more creating defenses. Did you see there was a discussion in the Congress with Mark Zuckerberg and a senator, old-style one, and he said, well, but I don't understand your concept because all this is free, how do you make your money? And he answered, well, Senator, we run ads. And this was so... When you see that, you understand that it's not running the good way, the right way.
Okay, well, I have a question. So perhaps I have more of a regional question. So what do you think the EU, or really the world, but specifically the EU, should better do or just start doing to better protect itself from cyber and hybrid threats, specifically from the Russian Federation?
So, well, first I believe the EU to survive, in fact, to meet its objective, to meet its historical fate, destiny, should stop being a follower or positioning itself in reaction to what the world is doing, and try to think how it could be a leader in some on some topics, especially on this one. Today, when you go to Brussels and have discussion in those meetings where we discuss digital economy, this is very much in reaction. So all those GAFA are invading us, and how are we going to fight back? And of course it doesn't work. For the reasons I said, because you do that too late, you do that, you're defensive. So I think there should be a whole change of mindset. Now, regarding the Russian hacking, and by the way, the Russians are not the worst are the Chinese, and the North Korean. No, but really, I mean, the Chinese, they have units of the Chinese armies that are dedicated to cyber attacks, organized as well, and they are targeting big companies because, in fact, so the Russians have more political objectives, so the Chinese really have economical ones, and they are structured like that, and this is not official. But the first thing for the European Union to react to that would be to be conscious of the problem. And really, the debate today on European policies is more about how we are going to protect ourselves against the GAFAs, how we are going to run a European cloud. I'm not sure this is a real question. In certain ways, the discussions, the debate, they are here in the United States on digital economy are more actual. Like the debate on the hackback. The debate on the hackback is a real debate. I don't think the hackback. So the hackback is a question whether you should allow a company or somebody that has been hacked to hack back. to pursue the attacker into its server and destroy its server or whatever. This is a real question of principle. Because you're not supposed to do that. I mean, you're not supposed to do justice yourself. But nobody does it for you. Because, well, if somebody's being killed or whatever, the justice will take it in charge. If you're being hacked, you're going to try to fix it, but nobody will pursue, in fact, the hackers that did it to you. So, do you allow this company to do it for itself? That's the question. Those questions are being debated today in the American Congress. They are not in the European Union. I think the European Union is very, very defensive. And I think, by the way, this is part of the crisis, of the more global political crisis we have in Europe. I mean, to go on building something like such a construction, you need to have an ideal, something that is more than just we will protect your day-to-day interests. That doesn't work.
So if the EU is not a leader, who's a leader? Is the US a leader in cybersecurity? Because I feel like we're late in the game because like voting confidence is not high in the US due to cybersecurity breaches in the election. So are we the leader? Are we the example?
So I think there's no leader today in cybersecurity. So there are leaders in the attack. The Chinese are really good. But this is an asymmetric war, first, very asymmetric war, where on the attacker side what we see is an association between, more and more, an association between state-ruled organization and small hackers. And this happens on the dark web. This is really fascinating what the dark web has become. The dark web has become a marketplace. In fact, it has always been a marketplace. You could buy drugs, guns. Well, here you don't need to go to the dark web. You could buy whatever you want. But now, what's interesting is that all those people that want to sell things, forbidden things, are meeting there. And so it has became a huge and very complex supermarket. It is not just people selling illegal things to citizens. No, it is people exchanging illegal things and creating bunches of arranging themselves in very sophisticated chains to create a very sophisticated attack. For example, and you have companies that do that for you. You can hire companies that will look at the dark web, who is discussing about you. You will see if your password has been hacked, which may be possible and you don't even know that. If it's being sold, if you are in a company, if you're in a set of a list of passwords that are being sold, and then there are another hacker that wants to buy them because he's a sort of broker and he's working for a state driven unit like one of the Chinese army of whatever that want to attack whichever big companies, and is buying to brokers those passwords and trying to see if they can use it to crack. And this is what you find on the dark web. So this is really a very creative environment today. And on the other side, where you have many companies trying to more or less fix it, and of course, there's some. I mean, I'm not. I don't want to diminish the work that is being done by states, but let's say there is no. I don't think there's a leader today, and I don't think there is a clear view of what we should aim at in terms of organizing the free world against those people. And well, some debates are interesting, but it's a little messy. Like, I don't know, do you remember a few months ago there was sort of white paper about the American nuclear doctrine. So, in which case are you allowed to use nuclear weapon? And somebody made the proposition that in case of major cyber attack, a major cyber attack could be the trigger of a nuclear response. Well, this is a debate. You can, I'm not a fan of society, but you can have the debate. But what I mean is, this is messy. All those debates are going like that all around, and it looks like nobody really feels in charge and also more empowered to run something resembling a leadership or at least a vision.
So on the flip side of what you were talking about disruption becoming a trend as opposed to a dialectic, what do you think about the kind of the countercurrent of states who are doubly cracking down on internet activity, who are producing outages during protests or during national exams or things like that? And how do you think that can be prevented?
I didn't get it, sorry.
Oh, okay. So as opposed to this idea of decentralization and disruption as the new trend, what do you think about the other kind of current that's emerging of states who are cracking down even more on use of internet technologies, who are cutting off internet during periods of social uprising or things like that?
Well, so because of my political experience, I tend to believe that in the long term, the one who wins are the ones that are consistent. You can be consistent in trying to build a free country, and to emancipate the people, etc. And you can be consistent in trying to do the opposite. And the Chinese, for example, are very consistent, in fact. So the ones that are consistent can win, whatever their vision. The ones that will surely lose are the ones that are inconsistent. I feel today we are a little inconsistent on these questions, especially in Europe, because we both want to regulate, we want to have the growth from the digital economy. Of course, there are tensions between regulation and having the growth. We want to have the full security, but we don't want to put constraint. For example, I give an example, the debate on encryption backdoor. This is ambiguous. So do we put the accent on full security, or the fight against terrorism, and then we need encryption backdoors? Or do we put the accent on freedom and full freedom on the internet, on the digitalization world, and then there should not be encryption backdoor? I feel we're not consistent. And well, regimes that are more consistent have certainly an advantage. Yeah.
My question is more related to automation and how it would help build in infrastructure systems, sustainable systems, sorry. Because I'm coming from I work in the infrastructure business, and we hear a lot about emerging technologies like connected vehicles, the use of drones to monitor construction work, or even 3D printing, use of blockchain to help with project controls of capital projects. So I'm curious to know what you think of how the automation and digitalization would help with building sustainable, let's say, transportation infrastructure systems.
So that's an excellent question. I think that's a real challenge, because what we see is that most of the infrastructure benefits from very centralized powers and very centralized states. And by the way, the comparison between American infrastructure and some European countries' infrastructure is a demonstration of that. I mean, I took the railway like a few weeks ago, well, I used to be a minister in charge of the railway. When I was in charge of the environment, I was in charge also of transportation and housing. And I liked it very much. This is a tough world, unionized, etc. But it's a world of patience. And honestly, I mean, a lot of French people won't say that, but when you travel, you should acknowledge that the French railway system is quite good. Well, this is also the product of wars, by the way. And the German railway system is great too, because the railways used to be the way to carry the troops to the border. So it's been developed over years. So there are good and bad reasons to that. But anyway, there is a good railway system. In the US, there is none, and the infrastructure in general are a little crappy. And I suppose this is because of the structure of power. So I personally strongly believe in state. I'm not advocating a non-state, a no-state power. And infrastructure is certainly one of the examples of what can't be achieved without a centralized power. What I believe is that states today should should trim, let's say, amongst its historical attributes and keep only the ones for which there are no alternative. And infrastructure is certainly one of them. And for the others, and for all where it can be done, should try to engage more the end users, citizens, and whatever. That was I'm very consistent. That was the theme of my campaign when I campaigned for the primary. I was very much campaigning on the idea that we should, to renew democracy, we should try to engage more the citizen, change the constitution so that, I often said in my speeches, in a world where you can grade your teacher on your iPhone, and how is it possible that you can vote only once every 5 years for the president, and then that's done? It doesn't work. So I'm not saying that representative democracy is dead, but I'm saying that we should hybridize it so that it's more acceptable, and not only acceptable. It's not only a question of acceptance; it's only a question of efficiency. So I think it's very much. By the way, that was also the theme of the campaign of Emmanuel Macron. He advocated that very much, but he did exactly the opposite when he was elected, which is a sort of disappointment for all the people that believed in him and a source of violence today in France. I don't have another answer. In fact, you need the state to do this type of thing. All the people that have tried to do infrastructure without state. So of course, let's have something.
Also, we see that the federal agencies, state agencies, they try to apply this concept of sustainability by trying to optimize the social, economic, and environmental aspects of their projects or their strategies, but there is also a reluctance towards applying technologies to help with that purpose.
Do you have an example in mind?
I'm thinking of to monitor the work, the construction work, for example. There is an idea of using drones, and it has been applied in different countries. One of them is Japan, and it has been very efficient with collecting the data on real time and being able to detect deficiencies on real time. And that has been very efficient. But the thing is that here, for example, FAA has a lot of regulations on using drones and at which height it should be, it can fly, and what coverage, how much coverage it can do. So there are a lot of restrictions with using technologies that can help with achieving the purpose of sustainability. I mean, it's interesting.
Well, There's always been a debate in terms of ecological policy between those who believe that just adding new technologies, what they call progress, will solve the problem, and the ones that believe that progress is the problem, and that you should more or less stop and try to get back to a more traditional way of life. I personally believe that this dialectic is a little misleading. Well, of course, it is not absolutely nothing, but this dialectic omits one major question, which is a social question. And by the way, this is what you see in France today. You can't, being based on technology, what they call progress, or another thing, you can't lead sustainable policy, an environmental policy, without taking into account the social question. In fact, you can't tell people that it looks painful, but it's good for them because in the midterm the Earth will be better off. That doesn't fly. And so any environmental policy has to take into account, not as a byproduct, but as a first objective, the social question. And it does not. It does not, especially if this is mainly technology-driven. So it can be technology-driven, but it has to take it into account as a first objective, I would say. If it doesn't, it's rejected, and people turn their back to it.
Hi, thank you for your intervention. So you were just speaking about the social aspect, and we see that it's going to be a major issue in the future to master the technologies for the young people as a factor of integration in the society. I mean, understanding those concepts of blockchains and so on to be inserted in the society and the globalization. So do you think that it's the role of the state to do that through education and through schools? And what is the good method to provide future generation the keys to understand those?
So I think it's a major role of the state today to develop a vision of that, and not only a vision, but to share some perspective. If you look at the net consequence of digitalization, so some of them will say, like with Schumpeter, that there is creation of jobs and destruction of jobs. But the problem is it's not for the same people. And in fact, more and more people feel out. And this is, by the way, a key of explanation of a lot of political movements across the world, in Europe, in the United States, but also in Brazil, for example. The discrepancy between a part of the society that can move, that so-called benefit from the globalization, but it's not only that, it's the people that have the ability to move, and others that are stuck somewhere, or feel they are stuck somewhere, because politics, society is much also a question of representation, of feeling. It's not only the fact, it's the way you represent yourself in the new world, and if you feel you can't move, you're there, you're assigned there, and the others can go away, and if something happens, you will be the one paying for it, because you can't move. You develop a lot of frustration. And that's I think, what's underlying a lot of those political movements that are so-called demagogical. Well, some people that get it and exploit more or less this in the speeches. So this is certainly a role of the politics and of anybody that wants to have an impact on the modern world, a positive impact, I mean, to have a reflection on that. Now, what I think also is that the speeches we hear usually and the actions that are taken are very inefficient, are very insufficient. I mean, it's not, you can't just say like, you're going to teach code at school, for example, and this will be a new chance for all kids. Because it does not take into account this feeling that some of them are stuck somewhere and some of them can move, in fact. And this is mainly the response of the democratical movements in the democratic world. For example, that's what you hear in France. You hear a president saying that new economy is there, and we will teach, train people so that they can benefit from it. Well, this is, of course, it's better than nothing, but this can't be heard by a lot of people because they don't believe it. And because, in fact, for some of them, it won't be true. So, for some of them, it sounds like an insult because they feel you're lying or you're just not considering them, you don't see what's happening for them. So you have to find something else, and the something else, I believe, is more about territories. How do you making so that some places that are lost in this movement remain livable and develop their own economy? And their own economy can't just be, hey, we are going to have a bunch of startups and you will have a WeWork in your place. That doesn't fly. And then there was a guy over there that is asking for the speaking. I'm defending you.
Thank you.
Okay.
If tomorrow you were the president of France,
I would love that.
what actions would you undertake to improve the cybersecurity, given the current environment and the emergence of blockchain and decentralized markets? What would be your plan? And same question if you were in the shoes of the President of the United States.
So, as I said, I'm not sure I want to tell the truth. So more or less what I tried to advocate at the end of my speech, I think we should work on responsibility. The old style, the old way to do it would be to regulate and to say, to issue big law saying here's what you have to do as a company, as a minister, as a citizen, etc., etc. And this would take years and not be that efficient. I think the efficient way, or the more efficient way at least, would be to work on responsibilities. Who is responsible for what in case of a major flaw? But today it's not clear. That example I gave with WannaCry and NotPetya, today it's not clear. So for some of the data, for some of the companies it's clear, and those ones are doing something. But for a lot of them it is not. And I take an example, IoT. You find on the market a lot of really defectuous IoT stuff today. Because, in fact, security is not taken into account. So you can find some tools to have your door open, domotic, etc. But this is not securized, most of it. So this is, of course, a problem. You can make a regulation, but this will take years. The other way to do it is to have, for example, your insurance company saying, well, your insurance doesn't work if you use a non-secure domotic system. That will work much more quickly. And this is not done today. I had a discussion with some insurance companies when I was between my political years and my business years, and I visited some companies to make my mind. I wanted to work on cybersecurity, but I didn't know yet exactly in which context. And before choosing an IT service company, I thought that insurance might be the way to change things. And I was very disappointed because, in fact, the insurers I met were mainly working on two sides. One was, could we sell contracts for people who want to hedge their cybersecurity risk, which is legitimate, but it's a small side of the problem. And the other side was, how can I protect my own data in terms of cybersecurity? It's also legitimate, but that we're not thinking about all those things that are insuring your car, your house, etc., and how it will be impacted by the numerous flaws in cybersecurity. Well, if they were thinking of it, they could have an action on that. And maybe the state the state could, the law or something could by changing the scheme of responsibility, do a major change for the whole economy. I think that would be the way to go quicker than try to assign to build new regulation.
I'd like to ask you about what centralized power is and what is the working model of centralized power. Because if we talk about Bitcoin, for instance, it can kill taxation completely, right? So everyone can go online, just register and have a virtual bank. And can centralized power work without centralizing the economy? And is there a possibility for an alternative power? You said that old power is dissociating, right? But because of dissociating, new power relations appear. So as you said, the UN member can create a bank in a place where bank is non-existent for women. So isn't that just a way of creating new source of power, decentralized power?
Well, yes, but then there are two questions. First, this is the legitimacy of the new power. Because in the ancient world, we knew who we elected and who wasn't. That was imperfect, of course, but there was a system. And the system was based on some principles, in our countries on democracy, and however imperfect, it had certain virtue. In the new world, powers are emerging, decentralized one, but who is guaranteeing that this is democratic, whatever, based on some value, driven by some value? And then there's another problem, which is when power is so spread out that there is none. This is anarchy, and anarchy does not work. The anarchy is a world of violence. That's why centralized power emerged at some stage. I give you just a very actual example. So there were these strikes in France last weekend with the so-called gilets jaunes, yellow jackets. And usually when there is a strike, it's often led by unions, and they have to make a declaration to the prefecture saying, hey, we are this union and we declare we'll make a demonstration, etc. If there are some riots, cars burned, shops destroyed, etc., the people can turn towards the one who declares the demonstration, and there is a moral personality, I don't know how to say that in English, but there is somebody behind that will pay. The organization, the union, has to pay. So if during a demonstration that was declared by a union something is broken, they will have to pay. So what do? They have people taking care, making sure that nobody's breaking anything, because they know they will have to pay if somebody does. Well, what happened with the yellow jacket is that as this is a fully decentralized thing, and there is only a small association, but there is no bank account, nothing, some people went into the demonstration, broke a lot of things, and nobody's paying for that. Decentralized, autonomous world with no responsibility and no power, and so hence no responsibility is not an ideal world. I'm not saying nothing should change, but I'm saying the transition is a tough moment, and the target model is not clear yet.
So we're going to have two or a couple more questions.
Thank you for the lecture. So I'm from Japanese government. I'm currently studying here on leave. So we Japanese government we're having trouble in figuring out the direction of digital policy. So mostly it's on the EU side, but sometimes somewhere between EU and the United States. So my question is, if discussions in Brussels are too defensive, so what do you think is needed to improve or enrich the discussions?
On digital economy?
Yeah.
Well, I think what's needed is a vision. Today, it's defensive because it's only reaction. Because European Union has not anymore, or has not right now, the idea that it could lead the world again. I'm not saying it can happen tomorrow, but if you don't have an idea of being something more than when you are today, if you're just defending your day-to-day interests, you're not reaching anything. To achieve something great, you have to overdream. And the European Union is not overdreaming to anything. So it doesn't work, especially in politics. I mean, you have to take people with you and make them dream. And this is not lying. This is just sharing energy to dream about something better. And you have to dream 100 to get 10. If you don't dream even 10, you get nothing. Well, that's what's happening today.
The European used to build dreams or ideas which creates modern society. It's an issue.
Yeah, it used to be.
Yeah.
But Japan was 30 years ago too. I remember when I was a teenager, or you weren't born, but Japan was a model. It was both the dream and the nightmare of some countries that were thinking that Japan was going to lead the world. I mean, it was huge.
Yeah, we used to be very strong. Now that we don't have any capability to dream something. So.
Well, you know, things are going up and down. I mean, that might again. But one thing for sure, I mean, I believe, and this is from my experience in politics, you don't base, you can't base politic only on interest, good management, etc. I'm not sure you can base, by the way, you can build a great company just on that. But for sure you can't build a great country just on that. You need to share more than that to achieve that, and a little more.
Do you have an opinion on how, over here, do you have an opinion on how to manage the social crisis that will probably happen with massive unemployment in low-skilled, repetitive tasks that will be caused by AI and automation in the future?
Well, I was once very minority in my own party because I was advocating that we should at least consider the possibility of, the base revenue, which is from an economical theory point of view, this is both a very leftist idea and a very liberal idea, liberal in terms of liberal economy. I think this should at least be considered. Having sort of base revenue and then which gives a sort of some freedom and possibility of choice. But this is not sufficient. What needs to be added to that is a politics, and this must be a centralized politic in favor of territories. Because for the reason I said, because I think one of the major discrepancies today is about the people that are somewhere and are from somewhere and will stay somewhere, and the people that can move around. And so I think policy for this new world should take into account what we used to call aménagement du territoire in France. Which is, it sounds pretty kitsch, but this is the idea that you're living somewhere. Well, most of the people are living somewhere. So some of them are just turning around the world. But this is not the case of the majority of the people. And they need to have training, we said that, opportunities, a little money, and this could be the basis revenue, but they need to be in a place where something is happening. If they're not, they will feel rejected. Whatever money you give them, by the way, it won't be a question of the level of basic revenue you give them. If they have a feeling that it's happening in all big towns and they're in a place where nothing is happening, you can give them money. It won't solve your problem, you will get a revolution. Because, and I finish like that, there is an author I like very much. So you might begin thinking I'm communist because I began with Lenin. So I'm not. I was elected a conservative, by the way. So I'm not. But there is an author, an Italian communist author I like very much, which is called Antonio Gramsci. And Antonio Gramsci built a theory, which is, I think, really a basic one for anybody who wants to do politics. By the way, I know there are students in politics in this class, in this room. You must read Antonio Gramsci. So Antonio Gramsci built a theory to demonstrate that people don't vote according to their interests. And by the way, if they voted according to their interests, there are a number of people that have been elected that would never have been. We, politics, tend to believe, because of the level of education, the level of abstraction, that people will read the program and that you have to make sure that they will get what they want in terms of tax, in terms of all this, and that you have to build a program where they all have something for each of them. Well, this is bullshit. There are maybe 10 or 15% of their 10 or 15% of their motivation to vote. The bulk of their motivation is about what Gramsci called representation. Do you feel represented? Do you feel respected? Do you think this person will voice what you think? Do you feel when he speaks, well, she speaks, but more often when he speaks, do you feel that he's voicing something that was in you, but you hadn't the word to tell it? If the politic reaches that point, he wins. Whatever is in the program, and even if there's nothing in the program, because this is the main driver for the vote for politics. This is emotion. It has nothing to do with interest. And that's why I say it's not a question of revenue or whatever, it's a question of feeling respected for what you are. If you are from somewhere, you want to feel respected from the who you are and the where you are.